We're going to explore the 6 biggest mistakes that Blockbuster made and explain how Netflix wasn't the only reason for their downfall. The blue bar shows Blockbuster's revenue and the red bar shows Netflix's revenue. Now, it's easy for us to dismiss Blockbuster as just another business that went bankrupt because they couldn't compete with the internet. While there is some truth to this, there is a lot more to the story. You might be surprised to learn that there was once a time when Blockbuster had a fast-growing online movie rental business that even Netflix considered to be a serious threat. During the 90s and early 2000s, Blockbuster was running like a well-oiled machine. They were the biggest name in the movie rental business by far. They had exclusive distribution deals with movie studios, and at their peak, they employed nearly 85,000 people across nearly 10,000 stores in 25 countries. For many families, a trip to Blockbuster was part of their weekly routine. Throughout the early to mid-90s, the company was growing at a healthy rate and was being managed quite well. The first sign of trouble happened in 1998 as DVDs were gradually gaining popularity. Warner Brothers approached Blockbuster with a deal that would allow Blockbuster to have exclusive rental rights over new DVD releases for a period of time before they were available to the general public. This meant that, say, when The Matrix was released on DVD in 1999, if you wanted to rent a copy of it within the first couple of weeks, you could only rent it from Blockbuster and nowhere else. In return, Warner Brothers wanted a 40% cut of the rental revenue. This was a pretty good deal for both Blockbuster and Warner Brothers. In fact, it was the same deal they already had in place with VHS tapes. Unfortunately, the Blockbuster CEO at the time, John Antioco, turned down the deal. This was a pretty big mistake, and you're probably wondering why he turned down what seemed like a pretty good deal, right? Well, now it's easy to see that DVDs would eventually take over, but at the time they weren't as well known. A 1998 survey found that only 37% of video rental customers were familiar with DVDs. Blockbuster was still trialing DVD rentals on a small scale at the time, and they didn't want to commit to a full-scale rollout. On top of that, Blockbuster accounted for nearly half of Warner Brothers' revenue, and they likely overestimated the amount of influence they had over them. This was their first big mistake. They overestimated their value to Warner Brothers. After Blockbuster turned them down, Warner Brothers significantly lowered their DVD wholesale price, and Walmart quickly took advantage of this. They purchased a significant volume of DVDs at this low price, and then sold them in the stores for even less, which sounds crazy at first, but their plan was to cover the loss by placing high profit margin inventory in stores near the discounted DVDs. These are recent photos, but you can see that right next to the DVDs, they have $290 TVs and $98 digital download cards. They advertised cheap DVDs which brought more customers into their stores, and as a result, they increased sales on the nearby high-margin products. This is a pricing strategy called the loss leader, and it worked so well that other big box retailers like Best Buy started doing the same thing. Pretty soon, Walmart replaced Blockbuster as Warner Brothers' single largest source of revenue. Interestingly, Netflix was also trying to get into the DVD sales business as well, but when they found out that Walmart and Best Buy were selling DVDs at a loss just to get customers in the door, they realized they couldn't compete with them on price, so they abandoned their DVD sales idea and went with a rental-only approach. Blockbuster's mistake hurt both them and Netflix at the same time. The year 2000 was a pretty rough year for Netflix. The dot-com bubble had burst, which had severely impacted the growth of their small and not yet profitable online DVD rental business. In fact, they were running out of cash quickly and were hoping to get acquired by another company. They managed to get a meeting with Blockbuster and offered to join forces with them. They wanted to sell Netflix for $50 million while continuing to grow the online DVD rental business under Blockbuster's leadership. The Blockbuster CEO at the time, John Antioco, didn't even make a counteroffer and more or less laughed them out of the office. This was mistake number 2. Blockbuster massively underestimated the future value of the internet, and because of that, they missed out on buying Netflix in the year 2000 for just $50 million. It seems obvious now, but at the time, most internet-only businesses weren't yet profitable, and it wasn't known if they would ever be profitable. Also, around the same time, Blockbuster was also in talks with the infamous energy company Enron to launch a video-on-demand service. While we don't know for sure, perhaps this deal was another reason why Blockbuster was so dismissive of the online DVD rental business. Video-on-demand was certainly a better option, but the technology wasn't quite ready yet, and the Enron deal eventually fell apart, shortly before Enron's spectacular collapse just a year later. Despite not getting acquired, Netflix managed to tough it out for a couple of years, and in 2002, after seeing Netflix's growing earnings, Blockbuster realized that Netflix was starting to make a meaningful impact on their bottom line. At that point, they decided to make their first move into the same online DVD rental business that they had laughed off just 2 years earlier. They acquired a small father and son company in Arizona called DVD Rental Central that had a small-scale online DVD rental program. Blockbuster paid $1 million for the business and then gave the founders another $25 million to expand their service to compete directly with Netflix. This business eventually became Blockbuster Online, which was unveiled in 2004. For a monthly fee of $19.99, Blockbuster Online allowed customers to rent up to 3 DVDs through the website and have them mailed to their house within a couple of days. Customers could mail the DVDs back whenever they were done, and there were no late fees. It was the exact same thing that Netflix was doing, except Blockbuster was able to undercut Netflix by $2 per month, and it was actually working out quite well for them. In 2004, 2/3 of American households had internet connections, the majority of which were dial-up connections, meaning that the internet technology still wasn't quite ready for online video streaming yet. However, just under 3/4 of American households had DVD players, and Blockbuster still had a very strong brand name that was synonymous with video rental. While they were a little late getting into the online rental business, they still got in at a pretty good time. However, they missed out on a massive opportunity. And this is mistake number 3. They didn't combine their online and in-store offerings. At that point, they had grown to their peak with just over 9,000 stores, with 5,800 of them being in the United States. 90% of Americans had a Blockbuster store within a short drive of their homes. The stores could have been used for a number of things. They could have promoted online DVD rentals, they could have accepted online DVD returns instead of making customers mail them back, thus increasing the chances of the customer coming back to the store and renting more DVDs. Stores could have even offered a way for customers to mail order DVDs that they didn't have in stock, and this would have eliminated some customers' frustration of not finding the specific movie they were looking for. Across 9,000 stores, they had an enormous amount of valuable real estate, but they just didn't use it. And you might wonder, why didn't they? Well, that was because of pushback from their franchisees. You see, at the time, 1 in 5 stores weren't actually operated by Blockbuster. They were operated by franchisees who had a lot of control over how they ran their stores. Most franchisee owners were deeply skeptical about the company's new online movie rental business, and they lobbied hard to keep all of the new online aspects of DVD rental as far away from their stores as possible. It seems hard to justify bending to the demands of the franchisees, who only controlled 20% of the stores, but unfortunately, most of Blockbuster's senior management were older gentlemen with backgrounds in retail. Internet technology definitely wasn't their specialty, and it's likely they just didn't push back against the franchisees as hard as they could have. Despite this struggle, Blockbuster Online was still doing quite well. They were able to consistently beat Netflix on price, and about 1 year after launch, they reached 2 million subscribers. They missed out on another massive opportunity here though, and this is mistake number 4. They didn't learn from their customers' behavior. They had a huge amount of valuable information about their customers' tastes in movies. They could have used this information to generate movie recommendations, which could have been emailed to the customers with a direct link to rent. This would have created a stronger relationship between them and their customers and kept them coming back week after week. Netflix was already doing this with the Cinematch recommendation algorithm, and say what you will about Netflix recommendations in the current day, it was actually working quite well back then. Netflix had over 5 million subscribers at the time, with an outstanding 97% retention rate, meaning that in a single month, only 3% of their customers would cancel their Netflix subscriptions. In an effort to be more competitive, in 2005, Blockbuster stopped charging late fees. Although it wasn't that simple, here were the new rules. They still had due dates to return DVDs, but customers were now given a 1-week grace period after the due date. After the grace period ended, if the DVD still wasn't returned, Blockbuster would let them keep the DVD and charge them the sale price minus the rental fee. If the customer didn't want to purchase the DVD, they could return it within 30 days for a credit minus a restocking fee. If this sounds a little confusing, you're not alone. Many customers struggled with this. In fact, there were lawsuits over it. To make matters worse, franchisees had the ability to opt out of the no late fees program and continue charging customers late fees under the previous system. This is mistake number 5. They gave their franchisees too much power. As previously mentioned, the franchisees lobbied hard against the online DVD rentals, and they were now working against the no-fee policy too. Of course, most customers had no idea whether their local Blockbuster was a franchise store or not, so you can imagine there were plenty of frustrated customers who were charged late fees anyway, even though they were promised otherwise. While I'm sure the franchisees enjoyed having the freedom to control prices and fees, for the sake of customer experience, both franchised and company-owned stores should have all followed the same pricing and fee structure. There is also another tidbit about franchise stores which I'll get to at the end. In 2007, Blockbuster launched a massive campaign called Total Access to directly compete with Netflix. Customers could rent a DVD from the internet through the Blockbuster online website, and when they returned the DVD to a Blockbuster store, they would be able to rent another DVD for free. It was a difficult campaign to get their franchisees on board with, and overall quite risky, because they were losing about $2 on every free rental. However, they expected that over the long term, Total Access would attract enough new customers to cover the loss. This campaign was initially a massive success and doubled Blockbuster's online subscribers in just under 6 weeks. The future was starting to look a lot brighter for them. Netflix saw how well the Total Access campaign was performing and felt threatened. The Netflix founder and CEO, Reed Hastings, approached Blockbuster with a proposal to buy the Blockbuster Online division and set up a mutually beneficial system where Netflix and Blockbuster Online customers could both return their rented DVDs to any Blockbuster store. It would make Netflix DVD returns more convenient for Netflix customers, and it would bring in more foot traffic into Blockbuster stores. It was a promising sounding deal that had potential and would have benefited both of them. Unfortunately, a large shareholder, Carl Icahn, who was also a board member, wasn't pleased with the amount of money Total Access was losing. He drew public attention to the fact that they had spent about $200 million to set up and operate Blockbuster Online, and the company was now missing out on about $300 million a year in late fee revenue. He didn't like the idea of continuing the expensive Total Access campaign even further, and now also handling returns from Netflix. Icahn didn't like the direction the company was going in and had lined up a private equity firm that he wanted to sell Blockbuster to. He was able to exploit a dispute over John Antiocho's annual bonus and get him removed as CEO and replaced with James Keyes, who was the former president and CEO of 7-Eleven. Keyes had only been with Blockbuster for less than a year and, just like Icahn, didn't approve of the amount of money being spent on the new and currently unprofitable online aspects of the business. And this is the biggest mistake of all. Mistake number 6. Short-sighted management decisions. With Icahn's support, Keyes rejected Netflix's proposal. He raised the price of online DVD rentals and ended the Total Access campaign's free movie deal, almost a complete reversal of the progress that John Antiocho had made. And it's no surprise that at this point, Blockbuster Online's rapid growth stopped immediately. At the time, that was a short-term decision that unfortunately cost them in the long term. Many years later, Carl Icahn described Blockbuster as the worst investment he ever made. He felt that the company couldn't afford to keep losing so much money. However, he admitted things might have turned out differently if they had continued growing the Blockbuster Total Access program. By this point, Blockbuster was in pretty bad shape. They did try to get into the streaming business in late 2007 by acquiring the internet movie provider MovieLink. But by that point, in addition to Netflix, Apple, Amazon, and Walmart were also in the streaming business, which made it especially difficult for them. In December of 2008, CEO Jim Keyes claimed that he still did not see Netflix as competition. Instead, he pointed out Walmart and Apple as competitors. He was determined to keep the DVD business operating in the near term and said that DVDs are a melting glacier. Yes, it's melting, but it's a slow melt. Again, this is another example of a short-sighted management decision. They continued closing stores and losing money and eventually filed for bankruptcy in late 2010. The television provider Dish Network acquired Blockbuster a year later for $320 million, which was a very long fall from their once $5 billion valuation just 6 years earlier. Dish Network had plans to keep around 600 stores open and launch an online streaming service to rival Netflix. But these plans never ended up happening, and they ended up closing the last of their company-owned stores by 2013. One interesting tidbit is that as of 2020, the last remaining Blockbuster store is in Bend, Oregon, and it happens to be a franchise store. So even through bankruptcy and the eventual sale of the company, that franchisee still had enough power to keep their store running the way they wanted. So while giving franchisees too much power may have been a mistake for Blockbuster, it actually worked out quite well for that one franchisee in Oregon. So in the end, the thing that killed Blockbuster was Blockbuster themselves. Netflix tried to work with them multiple times, but they kept turning them down. They didn't leverage the value of their most valuable asset, which was their stores, and they didn't learn from their customers and try to provide them with a better experience. All of this combined with continuous short-sighted leadership is what eventually killed Blockbuster.